my new friends here, Jeff, Kyle, and Moish. I met them about what, Jeff? You and I met 3 months ago at some fancy thing in Nashville, Tennessee, or somewhere. And you are good friends with an awesome friend of mine named Peter Dunworth from Australia. He put us together. He's like anybody, when I have a great friend like that and I really value him and he introduces me to someone, I always take that meeting because I know it's going to be a quality meeting. And meeting all three of you guys, I can honestly say very top quality people. Jeff, why don't you explain what FRB is and what you guys are doing in the space? And I think we're going to have a really interesting conversation about protecting your wealth in the digital asset industry.
Well, Falcon Rappaport and Berkman LLP is a New York-based law firm founded back in 2018. In fact, Moish was one of the original founding partners. And my law firm out here in California in Newport Beach, recently moved to Irvine, merged my practice into their practice about 2 years ago. And I chair the asset protection planning group and do high-end estate planning for affluent families and successful business owners. And the firm has multiple departments, multiple specialties. Kyle is he'll explain his background, is in the corporate securities and digital assets group, and Moish is heads up the IP and digital assets group. And one of the reasons I joined the firm is because they were one of the few firms in the country that had a blockchain digital assets background, and I saw this as an emerging practice area for what we do in what we were doing in my boutique tax firm.
Now, you know, just looking at you and knowing you, you don't look like the typical digital investor. Like, how the heck did you, with a legal background, end up in this industry? Because I'm seeing a lot of guys that look like you come into the digital asset industry, and that's a compliment, by the way. But I think it's one of the key indicators to me about this industry that our timing is correct right now, because I see a lot of very smart, more seasoned veteran players that understand TradFi that are coming into the space. And you're not a part-time player in this space anymore. This is a full-on gig for you. Walk us through how you got to the space, Jeff.
I was going to ask the same question about you because we're similar ages. Well, my journey started in 2011. We were looking to attract the Silicon Valley client for my tax and asset protection practice. And I heard about Bitcoin. I set up an account, tried to work. Our law firm advertised that we took Bitcoin for legal fees. I thought that would be an attraction for the Silicon Valley group. And I personally tried to set up an account, got a cold wallet, and frankly, I was just adult. It was too complicated for me. And that's when Bitcoin was $600. So fast forward 2016, I'm at the Freedom Fest. I'm one of the speakers there, and I'm sitting in the audience, and the CEO of Overstock.com is speaking. And he talks about this thing called blockchain, which I wasn't familiar with. And he said to the audience of about 2,000 or 3,000 people, blockchain is going to be bigger than the internet. And for the CEO of a publicly traded company to say something like that, such a profound statement, I said, I got to learn about this blockchain stuff. And that's how I got introduced to digital assets. And I started getting clients in the firm. When I would do their estate planning, we'd ask what their assets were. And some of these people, particularly the younger ones, had something called Bitcoin. And we had to learn how to plan for their Bitcoin in their wills and their trusts. And because my practice is asset protection planning, and because Bitcoin was on this ascent in value, we wanted to use our asset protection structures to protect those assets in case they got sued. And that was the furthest thing from people's minds, but it was part of what I did. Whether I'm representing a real estate developer, a business owner, or now a digital assets investor, we have to take into account that asset class when we do their planning.
Can you just, and we'll get to the guys here in a second, but can you explain to the audience why they should be worried about this asset protection thing?
Sure. You know, my job as an estate and trust lawyer as I was trained in law school, my graduate tax program was to transfer wealth from your generation to your kids' generation and beyond. In essence, I was making our clients' kids and grandkids richer. It never dawned on me that there could be a black swan event that would befall somebody, since we live in such a litigious society. And once that lawsuit is filed, or the claim arises, even before the lawsuit's filed, uh, a lawsuit could wipe out all or most of their wealth, and there wouldn't be a legacy to transfer. And the process of going through litigation, the process is the punishment, not necessarily the loss, but the process. And I'm sure you know people, or yourself, you've been through something like this.
Yeah.
And so the idea of putting firewall protections around our clients' assets as part of the integrated estate planning process just made a lot of sense to me. And this goes back to 1985, 86 timeframe. And back in those days, there weren't many law firms that were thinking along these lines, that were doing estate and trust planning. So that's how I got into it. And over the last 35 or 40 years, it's become a very important part of our practice.
Yeah. Yeah. I think this is a really timely meeting, because a lot of people that I come in contact with, they have really pretty healthy valuation expectations on Bitcoin. And when they tell me they think it's worth 250 to a million, 13 million, 42 million, I keep asking people, well, why do you keep treating it like it's only worth 30 grand? You're treating it like it's worth 30. You just told me it's worth $500,000. Like, when I buy a Volkswagen, I have a different level of responsibility than when I buy a Bentley, right?
Right.
I don't send the Bentley to the car wash anymore. I actually hire someone to do it by hand, nice and soft, make sure it's just a different level of investment. Like, you're into the cat daddy of all investment theses, and people are buying $100 software programs to protect them on a tax place. Like, are you mad, man? You got $30 million worth of Bitcoin. Your cost base is $300, and you're pretending like $100 software is going to protect you. And and I know when the letter comes, that's when the party starts. You have to hire lawyers. 3-letter agency sends you the letter. There is no, oh gosh, I lost it on a boat. That's not an answer. So, Kyle, let's maybe move to you. You got involved in this thing. What are you doing, and where are you seeing the traction, and how are you guys helping people?
Yeah, and thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you, Gary. And it's always nice to see to my handsome partners here. I have a finance and securities background, and I'm, I guess, a relative newcomer to Bitcoin and digital assets generally. But when I joined FRB a couple of years ago, Moish and one of our other partners, Ken Falcon, approached me and they said, "Hey, look, we're getting a lot of inquiries in the space. You have a securities background. What do you think about this stuff?" It's like, well, I've heard a little bit about it. I don't know too much about it. And I started kind of diving in, and Moish gave me the best advice ever. And he said, "Look, just set up a Coinbase account and kind of come what may." And I think I dove headfirst down the rabbit hole, was doing, grinding on Discord for whitelist spots for NFTs and doing all that fun stuff and spending my time wisely. But when the dust settled and I saw, the writing on the wall for what these assets can do, and with my securities background, to answer your question, what we're doing to help people is we're trying to keep them out of the fire, just like Jeff does with asset protection, and Moish can elaborate on his intellectual property, and me with securities and corporate. A lot of these people are coming to us and saying, we have an NFT launch, we're trying to launch a token. I said, great. Do you have a partnership agreement with your partners? Huh? What? It's like, well, there are laws in place that prevent you from doing these kinds of things. We're going to try to help you, stay out of the fire a little bit. And we can get into what works and what doesn't work here in the United States a little later. But we try to help these people treat these like real businesses. Like you say, treat your asset like it's worth what it's worth. Treat your enterprise like an actual business. You need these corporate guardrails around yourself to keep yourself personally protected. You may need an insurance policy. You need lawyers. You need accountants. You need all these things. And that's been kind of the driving force, at least for the initial talks that we have with these people, to keep them protected.
When as a business, you just made me think of something. I'm sure you guys see a lot of businesses that have made mistakes, right? When as a business, if I start a company and I fund it for $1 million, it's kind of a punt at that moment, right? I'm probably not going to hire you at $1 million, but I start making money. I've got a partner. I go from $1 million to 10 million. When does that business, especially if you're in Bitcoin, when does it lend itself to go, okay, the management team needs to now go step up, mature, raise your game up, and hire professionals like yourself to protect assets? Because most entrepreneurs never think they're going to get sued. They never think there's going to be a problem. It's all, love and dove, and we're going to conquer the world, but it doesn't normally work that way, right? Especially as you get more successful, attacks happen.
Oh, absolutely. It's a great question, and one that I get asked all the time when I give these talks or when I'm presenting in webinars or what have you. And my view is you should at least have the conversation with an attorney at the outset. And the reason for that is when you're $1 million company, that's great and things are moving along and you're trying to expand and do all these things. But when you become a $10 million company, and you may have different ideas as to how that money may get allocated, or you may have differing ideas on expansion or where to go next or new product lines or whatever it may be. If you have a solid partnership agreement in place at the very beginning that says this is how decisions are made, this is how disputes are settled, this is how we divide up the money at the end of the day, it's a much easier conversation to have at the beginning. Once you start getting into those 10, 25, 50, $500 million ranges, people have very different ideas as to what goes on, and that can be a very expensive dispute. So the earlier, the better. It's not a one size fits all approach, but to harp on something you said before, I cannot tell you, Gary, how many times I've heard, I don't need a partnership agreement. He's my best friend. Well, everyone's best friends until it's time to write a check. And you got to be really careful when you'd be swimming upstream with that. I don't know.
Yeah. I think people underestimate, like, people change. You go from $1 million to 100 million, and maybe your partner's like, hey, I'm checking out, dude. This is enough for me. But what if you're like, oh no, I was taking it to $1 billion. Well, all of a sudden agendas have changed. He wants to get out. He's not going to work as hard. So these are things that I think the more challenging piece is, I'm running a small business. Do I really want to call Jeff and Kyle and Moish and get into a relationship? I don't want to use them. I probably can't afford you today, but I may need you in 10 years or 3 years or 2 years. How do I develop a relationship with you? One, I'll tell you, all should take these guys' phone numbers or contact, because you will, if you're successful, you will need a group of people like this. If you're half as lucky as I've been, you most certainly will need a group of people like this. And I've made mistakes not having these types of people. It's actually a little badge of honor, right? You're going into a different country club. It's a little bit like the Bentley. Hey, sorry, you're successful. You have to maintain some professionals around you at a different level than when you were driving the Volkswagen. It's just
Gary,
cost of doing business.
If your partner dies, you're going to be in business with their family, which you
Correct.
really don't want to do. And if you don't have an agreement that deals with your ability to buy their interest at their death, disability, or retirement, you're going to be in a nightmare situation because you don't know their family, you know your partner.
That is a fact, and that has happened. Okay, I mean, they will tell you, they have stories that make mine look like a Disneyland story. I mean, really, right? It's and most of them are avoidable. It's about planning, but no entrepreneurs don't want to do the planning. Moish, what have you seen?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly right. Just echoing what Jeff and Kyle were saying about how it really is never too early, I think, to have that conversation. There are different kinds of attorneys for different stages, but we really love working with companies that are, at that early stage and have a big growth trajectory. And, we work with companies of all sizes, and we've seen the good examples of companies that end up getting into their seed round and Series A and off to bigger and greater things. And we've seen companies that, avoid those problems, avoid those discussions early on. And then they get to that point later, they're raising capital, and there's all these kind of ghosts in their closet they never addressed. And it costs a lot more to fix it on the back end than it does to set it up the right way the first time. And so we understand that, and different entrepreneurs have different perspectives on this, but we really like getting in early, making sure we're only doing what that company needs or that entrepreneur needs, setting them up for success and kind of staying out of their way until those bigger issues come up, and then we're ready to, we're already on the ground floor and we know what's going on, and we're able to kind of more efficiently keep the conversation going in the right direction. Yeah, but I mean, as Kyle mentioned, I've been doing this since 2013. My buddy started a crypto mining company. It was mining as a service for others, and I was like, I have no idea what we're talking about, but he kind of forced me into it, and I learned, and just going from there, kind of every year since then, I've had more and more experience and seen more and more examples of things going awry. And so it's really fun to now take that experience in 2024. There's just, if I had known what I know now back then, in terms of the way I would structure things, in terms of the regulatory environment and challenges, in terms of the things that Jeff is talking about planning and structuring, those are the things that we like to try and like get people in, even if it's just an hour conversation. Here's things you can think about, you can bite off now and kind of go back off and do your thing. And then you kind of are armed with the resources to do things a little bit smarter than you would have done on your own.
Yeah. You mentioned planning. How does maybe we should define it. Jeff, what is asset protection and how is that different than wealth planning?
Asset protection, simply stated, is changing the title to certain assets that you own, that if you lost those assets would materially alter your lifestyle, and putting them into legal structures or buckets, as I like to say, so that if you're personally sued, the assets that you formerly held but that are now in these legal structures are not available to creditors, future creditors, to satisfy the judgment. Now, you can't do this, Gary, after your hair catches on fire. It's too late.
Yeah.
But if you do this pre-planning, when I'm sitting down to plan somebody's estate, they're focused on what's going to happen when they pass away. But I want to have an adult conversation with them about what might happen to them if they get sued. And at this time frame, lawfare is a word that's commonly understood by most business people, most people with assets, and they're worried. People walk around with a target on their back. It's not about what they did; it's about what they own. And Willie Sutton robbed the banks because that's where the money was. Lawyers go after people with large balance sheets, not people who are homeless. So what I try to do with the clients that we meet with is just educate them on, they're aware that there's exposure, and we have tools in our firm. We've got a lawsuit exposure and stress test that somebody can take, and in 10 or 15 minutes, they can figure out their relative exposure, because most people aren't thinking about getting sued unless they've been sued. And then we have a variety of videos that we produce that explain some of the strategies that we utilize. But we integrate the estate planning work we do, trusts, LLCs, and other types of vehicles, with asset protection. So if something were to happen after the planning is done, and they're not doing this to protect themselves from a current, known, or existing creditor, then what's going to happen is that lawyer that's thinking about suing you, when they realize that the assets are not available, they're going to want to sit down and talk settlement. And so our clients can settle cases very early and very inexpensively compared to what would have been the case had they not done the planning at all.
You guys have anything to add to that? And then how do you convince a young entrepreneur, 35 years old, 3 years into his business, okay, hey, let's start looking at asset protection, right? To your point, Jeff, your hair's on fire. It's a little late to call me. Like, I'm not a miracle worker, right? So you need to do this before you get into trouble, before the question comes. How do you get people to, up their game? And anybody can answer. How do you get a client to go, hey, it's time to take action?
Well, one of the really exciting things about, working with Jeff, and we've been doing this now for a couple of years, is the idea that these strategies can be employed for crypto, right? An LLC, a trust can own a crypto account, and you can maintain self-custody, and you can maintain all the ethos that you would want in crypto and Bitcoin, while maintaining these strategies. So that was kind of the exciting thing, was meeting Jeff and hearing from him. Oh no, but I want a self-custodial wallet. I don't want to just put it into a trustee and have them manage it, because the whole point here is to have ownership of these assets, but to do it in a way that is consistent with these strategies. And I think for me, I mean, Jeff, you can correct me if there's another example. I think the really compelling thing is if you have, say, 100 Bitcoin right now, and that's worth what, like $6.5 million at current market price, great. If you believe, as a lot of people we talk to, that Bitcoin's going to $1 million a coin, like $6 million, you want to pass it on to your family. It's like, awesome, congratulations, not a big deal. But if it's worth $100 million because it's $1 million a coin, like that's a big deal. You got to plan for that. So if that's really what you're thinking, that like that's what the valuation is going to be, and I think a lot of people really believe that. They watch Michael Saylor as we go. You know, we were just at Nashville, and we were like, yeah, like that's like you got to plan for that success, and just like, okay, I'm going to have $100 million and I'll figure it out then. Like, all right, great. Like, but the person who had thought that taking the time to prepare is going to be a lot more successful and going to realize a lot more of that effort from planning for it. So that's kind of what we think about is, you know, we're not here for the person that's going to just like YOLO and do it. Like, that's a lot of this industry, and we have a lot of clients like that, and that's fine. We take those people as they are. But if someone wants to sit down and try and, you know, maximize the potential upside here and really think through the strategies that are available, like that's what gets, you know, me excited working with Jeff and Kyle about these things.
And what's funny, Gary, the psychology of this, when you're talking to a client about doing their estate planning, they have to die in order for that estate plan to work. And so they're not particularly excited about going through the process. Going to your estate planner is kind of like going to the dentist. Who wants to talk about their mortality? But when you start talking about asset protection and how not doing asset protection could impact their lifestyle and, you know, cause them to have to go through extraordinary pain, going through a lawsuit and possibly losing a lot of their wealth, they're much more open to having a conversation about that because it's going to directly affect their pocketbook. So it's a difficult conversation to get them engaged in, but once you start explaining, I often will ask a client, you know, what's your driving record like? You know, it's spotless. Well, when the insurance premium comes in every year from Allstate, don't you send them a check? And they say, of course. And the reason they send the check is not because they plan to get into a car accident. It's in case they get into a car accident. And so asset protection planning is a similar concept. We hope it's the biggest waste of money a client ever went through, because obviously they haven't been through a lawsuit. But should they go through a lawsuit, they now have the ammunition to be able to push back against the other side and get them to the bargaining table and get the case settled quickly and inexpensively.
Yeah. You guys must like this question, right? What do your clients or potential clients think Bitcoin's worth? Because I think that is the way to identify. I like that, dude. Anybody that says it's worth $1 million, that's a client of ours. I mean, you could just send out a survey. Do you think it's worth more than 70 grand? And at what level? And you just contact them relative to the level they think. Call Saylor first. So
look, I mean, I'll say as the firm, like we're not here as tourists. We believe in it. We accept cryptocurrency. We've accepted a ton of cryptocurrency as payments. We hold Bitcoin on our balance sheet. You know, we're excited about it, and that's why I'm excited about working with these other two gentlemen in this practice group, because we think it's fun, we think it's intellectually stimulating, and we think there's an opportunity to make a lot of money, not just for ourselves, but to enable our clients to do that. So it's exciting, right?
Yeah. Well, maybe walk through some of the mistakes you've seen people with wealth, all the experiences you guys have had, maybe, because I think this is not, to Jeff's point, it's not something that, hey, I want to talk about dying, or I want to talk about having a massive lawsuit. I could be encouraged, though, by other people's horror stories. Can you share a few horror stories that move me? Because I think people are either chasing profit or they're chasing, hey, make sure I don't lose any money, like one or the other. What are the nightmare scenarios that you've seen that could have been prevented?
I mean, I'll let, Jeff, I'm sure has, hours of unbelievable war stories, but just in my, 20 years of private practice, what I've seen people do, whether it's in crypto or TradFi or even just ordinary businesses, people can sometimes make the mistake of believing their own story and believing the profitability is eternal. They think that I'm sitting on this pile of cash now, it's going to be there forever. I made it, I'm good, I'm set. I don't have to do any of these things. I don't need to hire Jeff and speak with him about that. And I've seen that happen a lot. And we always try to caution people, hope for the best, but plan for the worst. As Jeff said, the best waste of money you can ever make. And is exactly right. And people do tend to believe their own story sometimes a little too often. Sometimes it's warranted, but not always.
And we've had clients that before they came to us started their business, raised millions of dollars of capital without a partnership agreement, and then one of the co-founders was just not in the U.S. and just walked off with the entire thing. We help that client get it back, but that happens, right? It's like, well, who's your co-founder? Do you even know where they live? What happens if this was another case where there was a smart contract that had collected all the funds from something they had sold, and same thing, one of the persons quit the team and was still entitled to receive millions of dollars as payout. It's like, well, they're not doing anything and they're not entitled to that money anymore. But do you have a contract that says that, or are you just relying on the smart contract rails? So things like that, where you're marrying the technology with the legal kind of wet contract, the smart contract kind of idea. I think a lot of entrepreneurs, just especially in the crypto space, say, well, it's crypto, so we can kind of have automated, self-executing smart contract kind of things, but not really thinking about the business side of thing and how Delaware corporate or limited liability law works, and whether you set up your company in such a way that's going to be consistent with that. And then on the litigation side, just could go on right for the rest of the time here as to all the crazy things that people get sued for, legitimately or not, but they have to be prepared to answer those lawsuits.
To be clear, Jeff, this is probably going to lead to where you're headed, but you guys also handle legacy assets. You just happen to have an affinity. For instance, not all my wealth is stored in Bitcoin. I wish it was, but it's not. And it's probably going to take some years to unwind those investments. You can help me with the legacy assets, correct? I mean, you're not just Bitcoin centric players. You can help with the whole asset portfolio.
And any asset of value, whether it's real estate, Bitcoin, other digital assets, IP, we're always looking for ways that we can move assets off one's balance sheet, either at the business level, because corporations get sued, businesses get sued. We'll talk about labor and employment law and what a disaster that is. And also, Gary, the law isn't static. We have a major change coming to California, which I'll take a moment to describe. That 6 months ago, we never would have thought this would happen in California, which is not a particularly favorable debtor state. But assets held in qualified retirement plans are protected from creditors. Governor Newsom just signed the law that goes into effect January 1st. Assets in qualified retirement plans are no longer protected from lawsuits. So
Wow.
if you have a lot of money in your retirement plan, now if it's ERISA qualified, which is a different classification, it's protected under federal law, and that trumps state law. But if it's not an ERISA qualified plan, like a single member, let's say a doctor has a couple $1 million in his pension plan, he's not ERISA qualified. So if he gets sued, the assets in his pension plan are susceptible to creditors. And that was never the case in California, but it's going to be the case January 1st, 2025.
Is that for a California resident or anyone being sued by the state of California?
Well, a California resident. So if you're in a malpractice lawsuit as a professional and you've got $2 million in your pension plan, that was always off the table. Creditors couldn't touch it. So now you're either going to have to file for bankruptcy, or which nobody wants to do, or you've got a plan for those assets being potentially subject to creditor claims. And even the assets, if you have an ERISA qualified plan, which is the more broader protection, once you retire and start taking assets out of your plan, and you have to start taking assets out, it's called RMDs, required minimum distributions. Once you take the assets out of the plan, even with an ERISA plan, those assets are no longer protected. They used to be protected when you would take them out of the plan, but no, they're going to be no longer protected after next year. So no matter what state you live in, you have to be mindful that laws change. Wage and hour and law and employment lawsuits are driving the small business owner out of business. we have here in California what's called PAGA lawsuits. These are private actions against public interests, and you can have one employee who didn't take a long enough break, and you multiply that by the number of days they've worked for you times the number of their pay. You can be looking at millions and millions of dollars of liability. I've got this poor veterinarian up in Northern California who's looking at $9 million of PAGA liability. She's being sued for by a disgruntled employee. So you just have to be mindful that the laws are changing. They're changing to be able to allow creditors more access. And so it's important when you sit down with your planner, whether it's your financial planner, your estate planner, your CPA, these conversations ought to be happening on a more regular basis. Unfortunately, they're not.
I would also add, specifically in the cryptocurrency industry, we're actively involved in defending a number of people in, for example, the Celsius bankruptcy. And I don't know if you know about this litigation, but effectively the Celsius bankruptcy estate is suing 2,500 individuals and companies, not a misquote, 2,500. And these are people that were just putting their money in and out of Celsius, expecting either a yield or borrowing money, never expected to be sued, are now being sued by one of the best funded law firms in the country and having to defend a lawsuit because they were just interacting with the crypto service. So these are the kinds of things that people never expect would happen. And if you ask any of these people that are now being sued by Celsius, like, did you expect that withdrawing money from Celsius would open you up to a lawsuit in federal bankruptcy court? We'd have to hire counsel and potentially be pay tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars just to get rid of your case. Like, never in a million years did they ever expect that. But that's just it's such a litigious industry. And it's causing people to have liability, not just for their crypto assets, but potentially their entire, savings.
And Gary, the influencer industry are really under attack. You look at what happened with FTX, all the celebrities that got paid huge amounts of money to promote that, like Tom Brady and Mr. Wonderful. They're all, I'm sure, I don't have personal knowledge, but I would imagine they're all defendants in lawsuits because they made statements about the company that turned out not to be true. So if you're going to be in the influential marketplace, you've got to protect yourself.
It's true.
That's a space that scares me a lot, man, where people are, that's why I never give any advice to anybody about anything.
Although Larry David did say, do not use FTX. And I think he still got sued.
He did.
Kyle, you were going to say something. I interrupted you.
Oh no, I interrupted you. Technically, it's your show. Jeff's exactly right about the influencers. It's something that Moish and I have talked about, on our show and on other platforms. Is that instead of now getting paid to make these endorsements, the influencers will get basically a favorable valuation to buy into the company, so they can get a sweetheart deal on equity and then cash out, as opposed to getting paid, which does help. But Jeff's exactly right. I mean, if you come out and say, I think this might be a good thing, you target on your back right away.
Yeah. So when I think about that, I mean, are there rules that I have to consider before I can protect my wealth?
Well, the most fundamental rule is do it at a time when you least need to do it. If you have, and even if you do it at a time when you least need to do it, there are certain states that have laws that will extend to creditors that you don't even have, or customers you haven't even haven't worked with you yet. So when you transfer assets into these structures, there are statutes of limitations. Generally up to 4 years, a creditor can file a claim for fraudulent transfer, what we call avoidable transactions in certain jurisdictions. But once that time frame lapses, then they're time barred to bring a claim. So the sooner you get your assets into these structures, and the sooner you get that clock running, when that period expires. And other states like Nevada, Alaska, South Dakota, they've got very short statutes of limitations, as little as 1 to 2 years. So the sooner you get your planning in place, and the sooner you get the clock running, after that period of time, even if you're the most dastardly individual, once that clock runs, they can't do anything about it. It's called being time barred. And so for people who want to avoid the hassle of litigation, get their assets into a structure, let the time frame run, and once that clock runs, then they're protected.
So that's really the only rule. Hey,
Yeah.
find somebody with help before you're in trouble, before it's complicated. You're not going to get an insurance policy after the car wreck.
That's correct. Or you're not going to get flood insurance after the hurricane comes through
Right.
Tampa. Yeah.
Do you guys see it different when you think about wealth protection for Bitcoin? Is it different than wealth protection for, say, someone holding?
It's actually more pronounced, Gary, because if you believe and I do, that the projections by people like Michael Saylor, Bitcoin will be 13 million, 20 million, et cetera, years to come. You can transfer gift tax free your Bitcoin stack now into irrevocable trusts and put them in the trust that will last over 350 years. So there's no death tax. So if a Bitcoin is worth 62,000 today, and by the time you die, it's worth 5 million or 10 million, all that wealth is out of your estate and the government doesn't have the right to tax it on the wealth transfer. Plus, if you're sued after you set up the structure, that Bitcoin stack is not susceptible to creditor claims. So there's some very important and fundamental estate planning reasons, estate tax planning reasons, and asset protection reasons to get that Bitcoin into these structures as soon as possible, because it's the fastest appreciating asset class we have, and there's just no end into where the values will go. And so the sooner you get it into these structures and off your balance sheet, the more death taxes you'll save, and the more protected you'll be from potential lawsuits.
How many people are actually thinking about this, Jeff, professionally? Like of all the 50 million, I don't know how many people are invested in Bitcoin, but are people just beginning to take this seriously, or like where are you?
A good indicator, when we were back at the conference in Nashville, our law firm, there was probably 3 professional firms that were there talking about tax planning. Nobody was there talking about asset protection planning but us. So it's very early on. People aren't thinking this way. And most of the people that I talked to when I was at the conference, they didn't hold any Bitcoin. They were coming to see what this is all about, because people are starting to FOMO into the subject matter. There were times, there are 2 concepts or 2 names that you mention in pleasant conversation that will engender a reaction. It's Donald Trump or Bitcoin. People have definite opinions about that, especially Bitcoin. Now I don't see it so visceral. People will have what is that? Tell me more about it. A year or 2 ago, if you mentioned Bitcoin to somebody who didn't know anything about it, it was like some pejorative term. So like any new concept, we're in the early stages of adoption, but it's starting to accelerate. You can see that from the number of new wallets that are being that are going on the blockchain.
Are you guys starting to see? I mean, I think I didn't mean to offend you about, hey, here we have a gray hair guy, another gray hair like me, coming into the market. I was actually saying, look how rich this guy is in experience. He's coming into the Bitcoin space. That's what I was saying. I don't know why you took it any other way, but are you starting to see more and more real money come into this game? Because this little Kool-Aid stand that crypto was between 2008 and 2017, I don't think it's real money. It was a lottery ticket a bunch of people won. To me, I'm not saying anything bad about them, but it wasn't an industry I would have invested in. Today, though, I'd invest my entire life into this trade. Right now, it's so mature. It's like, I think it's impossible to stop. Are we seeing real money now show up? The quality of money that Jeff has, right?
Well, Kyle, I think you could speak to this, but I think the inflection point was when the ETFs got approved. Yep. And the amount of money that is poured into the ETF marketplace. I think that was really the demarcation point for me.
Yeah,
That's
I mean,
exactly right. And I'm sorry, Moish. And the thinking at the time actually was with the implementation of these exchange traded funds, it was going to be a boon for retail. It wasn't. I mean, it was a little bit, but it was really the institutional money that started really pouring into the space. And to your point, Gary, with this is, an unstoppable force. Once institutional money gets in, I mean, it's very hard to stop that. Once the big players get their arms around this thing, and who's going to stop them? They're the ones who are doing it. So, yeah, I think you're right.
yeah, I mean
And
that's
also,
what you hear anecdotally though is that the ETFs were the inflection point, but it's still there's like a year or two time lag now, where the actual institutional capital has the approvals, has the strategy, has whatever else it takes to actually really dive into the market and say, hey, we're allocating 5% of a multi-billion or trillion-dollar portfolio for this asset class. Those things generally take time. So you're seeing the early adopters start to do that. You're seeing the Michael Saylors start to evangelize, and other corporate kind of entities saying, hey, what if can we do that, right? But it takes time for that to really impact the market in, I think, such a big way. I mean, what we're seeing on the legal side of things is, especially on the regulatory, on the financial side of things, there's a lot of the really major law firms in the country are starting to think about this. I think really on the estate planning, asset protection side, if you go into any city, town around the country and ask, hey, what are you doing specifically about estate planning, asset protection for cryptocurrency, I think you're getting a lot of blank stares. I don't think it's hit that industry yet. So I think on the talk about the Black Rocks and the Fidelities, and these people are clearly thinking about this on the institutional level, but that's a very, I think, narrow niche of like the financial industry, and a very narrow niche of what just regular kind of high net worth people think about in general. So I think it's still
on the ground. I'm dealing with wealth advisors all the time, because we transfer our clients' holdings into their trusts and their LLCs and so forth. And I asked the wealth managers, what are you doing about digital assets, Bitcoin, crypto? And they're not selling it. They're not allowed to, even though it's been approved.
Yeah.
Even though the big firms have now, they're still not allowed to offer to their clients. So we're still very, very early in the process. And I see this industry, for my type of work, the ecosystem in this industry, people are not focused on doing the planning. And we have some major law changes coming at the end of next year, Gary, where the amount that you can give away gift tax free, which is right now 13.61 million, going to over 14 million in 2025. At the end of 2025, that number is going to drop by half. So if you can give away, $26 million of your appreciating assets today, 30 years from now, that $25 million could be hundreds of millions of dollars, and you've gotten out of the estate. People need to be focused on doing this, even if they're not giving that kind of money away. If they've got several $1 million and they can move it out of their estate, their heirs are going to save a ton of money on estate taxes. And we know Bitcoin is a legacy asset. Bitcoin is for holding, not investing. At least that's the way most people think about it. And so they want to put it into a structure that they're not going to have to incur any death taxes for multiple generations.
Yeah, well, most certainly at $1 million a coin, somebody could easily have 10 coins, 5 coins. I mean, you start looking at 5 coins at $5 million, even if it's in 10 years, that's like, you would not want that to be subject to a lawsuit. Somebody could grab, freeze up. Here you have the most liquid asset on the planet, trades on Sunday nights at 11:59 if you want to, and then it's locked up in a lawsuit. Like, you don't want that to happen. You literally, it'd be like wearing a condom to have sex and then you end up getting pregnant. It's like, what? Like, you clearly used, man up, man. I mean, it's just down to how I think people, especially entrepreneurs, they want to be successful, but they don't know when to really change their operating principles and bring professionals on. I have made this mistake over and over and over, thinking I was being clever, saving a few dollars, when in reality, just for the incremental, because I'm going to pay somebody to do some legal work for me, planning work, but to pay incremental, somebody that really understands the business, that I've probably underinvested in. Most certainly I've underinvested in, especially, but it's really got my attention now because I think Bitcoin has the ability to be probably the most outperforming asset I've ever been involved in. Most certainly it's not going to zero. So and most certainly it's not going to stay at 60 grand. So it's at least a 10x. My position now, at 600 grand is someone's going to I believe someone is going to try to grab some of this money. And it's not going to be a guy trying to take my wallet from me. It's the U.S. government. And if I'm not buttoned down, that's their job. Their job is to protect their P&L. Hey, Gary's over there. Let's see if we can make some money on Gary. If I button myself up, create a really nice moat around myself, this is your point, Jeff, then the enemy's going to go and offend another fortress, not mine.
Exactly. Hey, Kyle and Moish, you might spend a moment and talk about how you're tokenizing assets to raise capital in a much more efficient manner than doing these old-time SEC or Reg D offerings. I know that one of the reasons I joined this firm is because you have that capacity. I represent some winery owners up in Napa Valley, and the families that still own wineries have millions and millions of dollars tied up in capital, and they have thousands of people who buy their wine. It's a great marriage of raising capital equity out of their business operations, not having to go out and pay crazy amounts of money for paying interest, but be able to liberate some of the capital, and you can do that through tokenizing those assets. Maybe you can spend a moment and tell Gary's audience about how that works.
Sure, Jeff. Yeah, I mean, I think this is one of the really cool use cases about tokenizing assets and cryptocurrency. This is getting away from the Bitcoin stuff, but from a offering equity perspective, it's amazing to think that instead of having to run through the whole gamut of a accredited offering and raise capital, you could just sell a token and allow people to come in and own equity in the business and vote on a business and help participate in managerial efforts, things like that. Of course, all that has to be done in a way that's regulatory compliant, and that's why Kyle, as corporate securities partner, can help us do that. But we've done that in a way. Right now the regulations aren't there to make this super easy, but there are ways to do it. And for example, we allowed someone that had an NFT project to allow their holders to come in and exchange their NFTs for equity in the company, right? So and do that in a regulatory compliant way. So there are definitely ways to do that. You just got to work within the system, and we hope in the next few years there's going to be some more regulatory clarity on ways that are more customized to the ways that things are tokenized in real life, and not just you're Reg D or Reg C, because that's the way the SEC has been doing things for 80 years. But Kyle, I mean, on the securities side, you can talk about that.
Yeah, how much time do we have left? I could talk about this for hours. It's definitely there is definitely an avenue, as Moish was saying, to launch these funds and to raise capital, as Jeff was saying, this way in a manner that is compliant. It's not as clear as the SEC likes to claim that it is. What the SEC and Gary Gensler specifically would say is, come in and talk to us. We'll help you register. We're your friends. The SEC is not to bad with them. They are not your friends. They're a regulatory body, and they have bosses, and they have a bottom line to answer to, just like anybody else. And if you walk into the SEC and talk to them, you will walk out with a subpoena. So just don't do that. Talk to us. We will help you. But the reality is that the regulatory framework in the United States right now is just not very favorable towards people who are trying to do these. So a lot of them have to go overseas, or they have to get really creative as to exactly what they're doing. That's not what the US government wants. I know there's a lot of scuttlebutt about you're killing crypto and you're killing this. And we've received some word that, both administrations to varying degrees are going to be more favorable towards crypto going forward. We'll see what shape that takes. But as of today, the SEC does not make it easy for you. But Moish is exactly right. It's the embodiment of why we love this space. The creativity, the advent. It's a new technology. It's something that's more interesting than sitting down every day and just reading operating agreements for the past 18 years. And people, entrepreneurs specifically, who can see the light at the end of the tunnel, who can see that here's a new technology that's going to enable me to do something that is traditionally done one way in a different way, while and I think most specifically, opening it up to people who wouldn't necessarily have access to it in the first place. We talk about Reg D and accreditation. We're not going to bore your viewers with what that is, but those are traditionally, rich people. Let's call it what it is. When you do these tokenized projects and you're selling something for a couple $100 as opposed to $250,000, that's going to be a great entree for somebody who really didn't have access to this world before. And I think that's an amazing thing. And you read a lot of literature taking it back to Bitcoin. Here I am waxing poetic about it, but Bitcoin is a means for people who don't necessarily have access to strong banking systems to increase their wealth or to put their money somewhere. You talk about it in El Salvador, you talk about it in countries of Africa. It's an extension of the same thing we're talking about. It's new technology that just fosters innovation, and I get really passionate about it, and I love it. And I can go on for days about this stuff. So I'll stop right there.
Well, I most certainly think Larry Fink's here not just for Bitcoin. He is here to tokenize the planet. I think we're digitizing the world. Like I just, it's so natural. I was talking to my brother the other day. He's like, I don't know what digitizing. I'm like, look, we're not going to go back to the 8-track tape. We're going to compress more. That's what all these chips are about. Like I saw 2 deals on chips yesterday. I'm like, wow, like they're completely changing capacity of chips to be able to store data. So as long as we keep compressing, like there's no end to this. And I think I think everyone's underestimating. This is my point. Hey, it's not going to zero. This industry is no way going to zero. I really don't know. I think the industry could be a multi 30, 40, 50, $100 trillion industry in 10 years. It's simply about how much can be built. And we most certainly know there's going to be a lot of change. I mean, look at Ethereum today. It's struggling to have an existence here, which, by the way, opens up even more needs for planners. Because there's going to be losses. There's going to be opportunities here. I think we pissed off the U.S. tax man 2 years ago because the most taxes filed for on digital assets were when all we had was losses.
Yeah.
Dude, everybody went into filing taxes like they've never done before, and the government said, "Hey, fuck this, dude. You can't just file on the losses." Right? I mean, less than 1 million people filed out of 52 million. Like it's obvious to the IRS, hey, look, there's money out there. And then you get Warren going, there's $52 billion. It's like, well, so we have 86,000, huh?
Tax compliance is important. And we have a division in our firm that helps people with Bitcoin get their taxes filed properly. And then, we're big proponents of Node 40, which I know you have an interest in. I use it personally, and the firm is familiar with it. And it's just an easy way to track your basis particularly if you're doing trading, so that when you give the information to your CPA, if your CPA knows how to do the filings, it makes it much, much more streamlined.
Yeah, but Gary, that really scares me because you hear the Coinbase number of 50 million crypto users in America, and then you hear that number about only 1 million having filed, and then Kyle and I and Jeff go to a lot of these crypto conferences. I go, one of the ones I go to is with one of the major blockchain analytics providers, which allows you to kind of track and see who's doing what on the blockchain.
Elliptic or TRM or Chainalysis, right? Those guys.
Exactly. And when you go to those conferences, you know who their biggest users are? IRSCI, the criminal enforcement division of the IRS, and other.
I don't think Chainalysis has any public, any private customers. I think they're all enforcement authorities.
We're a private customer of Chainalysis. Yeah. So the law firms, but definitely the regulatory enforcement, the criminal enforcement agencies are spending a lot of money, a lot of resources to learn and figure out how to crack down, not just for tax compliance, but for other things as well. So yeah, people should not take that lightly.
Where maybe this is a question for Jeff, but what part of this is, what part of this business that you're doing is a part of FRB? I mean, what percentage do you think this is going to end up being a big part of FRB laws practice? The digital
in
side
terms
of this?
Numbers of clients, in terms of revenues, what's your metric?
Probably, well, let's do a little of both, because I think they're all going to come, right? I mean, the ETF is going to basically impregnate every human being in the United States with Bitcoin.
Yeah. I know in California, where I'm based, and we do a lot of work at the New York office. We're seeing more and more of our estate planning clients either owning EFTs in their retirement plans or owning Bitcoin through a private wallet. And it just, again, people are FOMOing into it because it's, you turn on CNBC and they've got somebody on their pomp or somebody talking about Bitcoin, Michael Saylor. So in terms of numbers, we're starting to see more and more people that come to us that have it. With the social media work that we're doing and the writing I'm doing, we just came out with a new video for people to watch that describes, how we approach estate planning and asset protection using digital assets. So I think it's going to become a very robust part of the firm, more so than it is now. And with 70 or 75 lawyers, which we have in our firm, talking to their clients, they're going to need this planning as well. And I expect a lot of that will come filtering through to the estate planning group in New York as well as California.
Yeah, and I'll answer it by just saying that, Kyle and I are co-chairs of our digital asset practice, and the way we see our jobs is to enable every other lawyer in the firm to do what they do, but for digital assets. And so when that comes to labor and employment, I want to pay employees in crypto. When it comes to litigation, I'm doing crypto disputes. When it comes to tax, I'm helping, figure out crypto tax audits. So whatever the practice of law is, our firm has now been doing that for 4 years in every distinct category that we offer, which is almost every category that'd be relevant to an entrepreneur. And so that's what we see. My thinking is you're not going to be talking about a law firm that does digital assets because, Gary, as you said, this is going to take over everything, and it's just going to be a law firm, right? So to be a law firm that can do your job at a high level, you're going to have to know how to do this. We've been doing this across every practice group for 4 years. But, I think that's just going to continue.
Yeah. Just a little bit of advice, and you can take this as financial advice if you're listening to this. If you have lawyers or accountants or auditors around you that are not Bitcoin centric and holding Bitcoin like Jeff is holding Bitcoin. I guarantee you, I'll bet you $10 million Jeff has Bitcoin. It's 30 seconds with the guy. I know who's got Bitcoin and who doesn't. Reading the white paper is meaningless. Holding Bitcoin in your own self-custody changes everything. If you have someone that does not hold Bitcoin, you should hire a different professional. I'm so proud of the Node 40 business because I looked at it and said, look, my professionals do not need to understand Uniswap. They need to understand a P&L, man. Just build a P&L that doesn't need anyone to understand what blockchain is. Like it's not necessary. They don't know what Brent sour crude is, and they can still do the audit, right? They can still do the P&L. And I'm really proud that but if you guys don't have someone on your side protecting you that understands crypto, like my legal team helping me on a divorce didn't know shit about crypto. They became a problem. Literally the other team says, oh, he's a criminal. And I could see Peter go, is he? He might be. Because he just didn't understand crypto. He had bought the story, having the clarity and showing them, and not having him with a big IQ and 12 years of college look at me and go, hey, what's blockchain mean? He doesn't want to ask that, right? He's a human being. So to be able to give them that information, now I had to do it. I shouldn't have had to do it. If I'd have known Jeff, it would have been a different deal then. I'd have been like, Jeff, I need this guy, I need this guy, I need this guy. And he could have pointed me in the right direction. If you hold 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 Bitcoin and you think this is worth $1 million, you deserve to have, that investment deserves to have at least a phone call with Jeff, Kyle, or Moish to figure out, are they too heavy for you or are you too heavy for them? I think that's only going to be the only question. Where are you in your maturity cycle? And when do you need to deploy a team like this? Would you guys add anything to that? Am I wrong? I mean, I don't bring my Range Rover to the same place to fix the engine for the oil change or whatever that my daughter sends her van. I treat these assets very, very differently.
Well, I will say, when in doing planning for Bitcoin, we there's a number of industries that support what we do. One great organization is Bitcoin Advisor. You mentioned Peter Dunworth. We work very closely with Peter and his firm for multi-signature protection, so that if the client passes away, there's mechanisms on which their family can access and utilize the Bitcoin. It's also very effective in asset protection planning when you have to get a signature from somebody who's in Australia. When a creditor is trying to collect your Bitcoin, they're not subject to the jurisdiction of a U.S. court. So there's a whole number of industries that support what we do, that make what we do work. And I would encourage your viewers to learn about these other industries. Go on the Node 40 website that you're involved in. Look at Peter's website with regard to Bitcoin advisors and see what they're doing, and incorporate that. Even if they don't wind up working with a lawyer, incorporate that into their planning to give them some additional protection.
Yeah, that's awesome. Kyle, you said you had hours to talk. I mean, what have we left out here? Have I not asked you questions that I should ask you? This is always an important question for me. I need to know when I'm going into a scenario where I actually don't know enough to ask great questions. I remember a lawyer asked me once, he said, "Hey, do you have any more questions?" I went, "Not any good ones."
Right?
Right?
I'm sure you have great questions.
but like, what am I missing, or what would the audience maybe be missing?
Well, I think it's just to kind of summarize some of the things we talked about here today, is that just because you're out of the starting gate doesn't mean it's too soon to talk to a lawyer or an accountant. If anything, that's the best time. And I think that's just a mistake a lot of people make, is that, well, I can't afford a lawyer. It's like, how am I supposed to do that? At least call and have the conversation, and be armed with the information necessary to make an informed decision. If you decide it's too expensive, or you decide you're not ready for it, that's fine. But at least go in knowing what you're walking into. It's much better position to spend a little bit of money now, as opposed to having to spend it years from now, and having to call on the litigator, and having to call in, Jeff, to help you out of just a frying pan situation with the IRS and some of the illusions you made before. It's, you put on the seatbelt before the car accident, not afterwards. It's that kind of mentality. And just one thing that I always hear, always, whether it's crypto or whether it's traditional finance, there is no friends and family exemption in the federal securities laws. If you raise $1 from your friends and family, congratulations, you are under the purview of the federal securities laws. Call me, I will help you navigate those waters.
Very interesting. People forget that, man, real quick.
Yeah,
it only took, I stopped investing with Grant. He started taking unaccredited investors. I'm like, I'm out. Not interested, because I've never sold anything to consumers. I still have a consumer lawsuit from some agency. I'm like, I've never even touched consumer. But he was a little offended. I'm like, bro, it only takes one. You know how many people sued him? One dick. He got an appeal. I bet it cost him $1 million.
The $5,000 investment I read.
Dude.
That's all.
And the guy actually made a return, dude. The guy made money, and he's still bitching.
Yep.
It's really disgusting. But he spent $1 million. He could not spend that money. Right. So this kind of stuff happens. Even if you're the best operator in the world, you can get the lawsuit. People just start, oh wow, Gary's got money. Let's throw a claim. Right. Let's see if he spooks him.
He was doing something for the benefit of somebody else. I mean, it's a tale as old as time. The road to hell is paved with good intentions, and that is a perfect example of that.
My biggest mistake people are making with their Bitcoin, as it relates to planning, tax, legal.
I think the simplest one is just that people don't think about what's going to happen when they pass away, and that they don't it's hard. You tend not to, as Jeff was saying, it's not something you want to think about. It was really morbid, but people don't think about, even if they're not employing any strategies, even if they're not talking to an attorney, does my wife know what's going to happen? Is there a backup plan somehow? Who knows that? Because the reality is, these assets might be worth something someday. You don't know that. You hope they do. I was talking with Kyle about some guy that accidentally threw out a thumb drive into his dump the other day, and he sued the town village for not letting him go go through the dump to find $500 million of Bitcoin. You never know. So be thoughtful. Plan for success, and that's really it. And that could include attorney. If it does, we hope that you contemplate using someone that knows about the space. If it doesn't, just try your best to make sure that it's not just about yourself, but you're thinking about your legacy and your family and your coworkers and co-founders, et cetera.
Yeah, really interesting point. When I first got into Bitcoin, everybody was telling me that they'll never sell their Bitcoin. And I'm like, let's see, 46% of you are going to get a divorce. Most certainly you will sell your Bitcoin. You won't even have control over it.
Yep.
If you don't have control over your Bitcoin, you will not have control over that decision. And this is where the Node 40 thing just saved me so much money. In fact, the crazier they get, depending on the day and the volatility in Bitcoin, it can actually be a great benefit to the owner, because that's going to go away because more and more people are going to become comfortable with Bitcoin. But they were so terrified of Bitcoin. I'm like, yeah, you guys don't really want any of this. And they didn't. They just didn't understand it. I don't think she would serve well. But 100% of Bitcoiners are going to die. Right. And I don't think anyone, unless you think it's cool just to leave 1,000 Bitcoin sitting in a wallet and nobody gets access to, I'm not investing for that. Okay. I'm investing to sell this into fiat or some other better currency at the time, and then reinvest it in this world and make the world a better place. I'm not going to hold on to my Bitcoin to my grave. That'd be like Jeff taking his yacht to the grave with him. Right. That's why he rents it. He's like, I don't want to have the exit fees.
Gary, the people that are not married who have Bitcoin before they get married need to put their Bitcoin into one of these asset protection trust buckets.
Oh yeah.
So if the marriage doesn't work out, that Bitcoin is not going to be part of the family law court jurisdiction, which winds up being part of the settlement agreement. So I see that mistake made over and over again, particularly in Silicon Valley.
Have you guys ever seen like a partner try to take money out of a corporate bank account? Of course, the answer is yes, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, what do you think if you split your Bitcoin wallet with a girl that you were having great sex with in October, but it didn't go so well in January? I mean, people are not planning, man. They are so ill planned here. They're going to get, I've had so many bad things happen to me in my life, and I'm a good guy, but shit happens. People change. And the person you thought you knew, 2 years later, they're a different person. Just like I'm a different person. I mean, I came home one night, get a phone call from a bank president saying, hey, are you really trying to move $10 million into a different account? I'm like, no, I didn't. I'm not doing that. No, but if it had been a wallet, it would have been gone. Yep. See, this is the value of having that third party there. You get the phone call because I treat people decently, but I got the phone call. Had that have been in a wallet, I would have had less than $10 million. It would be gone. The other person would have all the leverage on me. Now, I can go sue them, but I don't have any money at that point, right? It's all gone. Right. I mean, we've never been in Bitcoin territory before. Like most people don't keep $10 million in cash sitting under their pillow for their spouse to take. I mean, most people don't do that. Drug dealers, maybe. Anyway, any closing comments, gentlemen? I really appreciate what y'all are doing. You're making me quite convinced just seeing lawyers and tax guys show up and go, hey, this is a big game. We're going to develop a whole division around this. That tells me another indicator that Bitcoin is a real deal. It's getting all the compliments, all the tools around it to be a super industry. Am I right? Wrong? Any additions to that?
When you have a president show up at the Bitcoin conference and a presidential candidate show up and senators and congressmen talking about this, it's gone mainstream, Gary. The train's left the station.
Most certainly. Yeah, most certainly. I just don't think the price is caught up with it. I find it a little weird, but the price is not caught up with this traction.
That's
Moish,
okay.
Kyle,
I just want to thank you for having us on and for everything you do in the space, and really appreciate the opportunity. So thanks, Gary.
Yeah, no problem. Kyle?
I second that, but also, if the price hasn't caught up, that's okay. We can just DCA it until the cows come home and reap benefit. So I'm okay with that for now.
I'm with you. Grant called me the other night. I told him to buy in I said, dude, if it hits the 50s, because he was the big mouth going, hey, I want to buy $150 million worth of Bitcoin. How long will it take me not to impact the price? And I was like, 10 hours. 10 hours. 3,000 people are online. He's like, 10 hours. That's ridiculous. I said, bro, your 150 million is nothing.
Yeah.
This is a $50 billion a day. It's really consumed a lot of volume. I think it's really impressive how mature it's behaving. I was expecting really violent move, 10 and 50. I don't think that's healthy, but I was expecting the ETFs to really change the price. This is healthy to me. But I think the 50s, he called me yesterday. He's like, well, maybe I should have put a bid in at 59.8, right? I said, yeah, bro, you're not going to be able to wait till 3 o'clock in the morning. It's going to ping you and you're going to be able to buy that.
Yeah.
There's so many people that aren't here yet. They're trying to be clever on price. He will not DCA in. He wants to be a stud and he's going to miss the market. And I think it's funny. I can't wait till he has to buy 98 grand. I'll go, hey, I sold that to you, by the way.
That's great.
Guys, thanks so much. One thing I did want to suggest that once y'all are ginned in and I'm ginned in, it may be good to do a little promotion on what you guys are doing. I could probably do that on my show, and it's so neutral for me. It's not like hey, buy this hardware wallet, right? Anyway, we can talk about that later. But Jeff, thank you so much for orchestrating this. Kyle, Moish, you guys are great guys. You guys contact the guys at FRB, okay? If you have 2 Bitcoin and you think it's going to be worth millions of dollars, if you have hundreds like me, you need a freaking great firm. There's only 3 or 4 of these guys out there. Interview them all. I happen to like these guys a lot. I've had dinner with them, met their families. They're awesome people. But there's other companies out there that do it. And the cool thing about these guys, they'll tell you who does it. And you get to make a decision on where you go. So very good seeing you guys again, and look forward to chatting with you. Hopefully you guys are coming to the party. So that'll be fun. Thank you guys.
Great. Thanks, Gary.
Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Gary.
Yeah.